The summer sun beat down mercilessly on Thunder Ridge, turning the dusty main street into a shimmering ribbon of heat. Marcus Thornwood stood at the edge of the crowd, his weathered hands gripping his hat so tightly his knuckles had gone white. For 3 years, he'd worked his ranch alone, watching the land slowly reclaim what he'd built. The loneliness had become a physical weight, pressing down on his chest until some nights he couldn't breathe. The mail-order bride auction wasn't something he'd ever imagined attending. Desperate men lined the wooden platform, their eyes hungry and searching. Marcus had saved every penny, sold his best cattle, and mortgaged his future for this moment. He needed help. He needed companionship. He needed someone, anyone, to share the burden of his isolated existence. When they brought her out, the crowd fell silent. Svetlana stood nearly 7 feet tall, her shoulders broader than most men in attendance. Her face was beautiful in an angular, striking way, with high cheekbones and eyes the color of storm clouds. But it was her size that made everyone stare. The auctioneer stumbled over his words, clearly uncertain how to present her. "She's from the Russian steppes," the man announced, his voice cracking slightly. "Strong as an ox, can work harder than 3 farmhands. Who'll start the bidding?" Silence. Men shuffled their feet, looked away, whispered to their neighbors. Marcus watched her face carefully. She stood straight despite the obvious humiliation, her chin raised, refusing to show weakness. In that moment, he saw something he recognized, pride wounded but not broken. His hand shot up before his brain could stop him. $500. The crowd turned to stare. The auctioneer's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. 500? That's the opening and closing bid, folks. Anyone else? More silence. Marcus could feel their judgment, their curiosity, their pity. Let them think what they wanted. When no other bids came, the auctioneer's gavel struck wood with a sharp crack that echoed through the afternoon air. The journey back to his ranch took 4 hours by wagon. Svetlana sat in the back, her massive frame making the wagon creak with every bump in the road. Marcus tried several times to start a conversation, but her English was limited, and his Russian non-existent. They communicated through gestures and broken phrases, awkward and stilted. As they crested the final hill, his ranch came into view. Marcus felt a familiar shame wash over him. The house needed paint, the barn roof had holes, and the fields looked tired. What had seemed adequate when he lived alone now looked pathetic through a stranger's eyes. "Home," he said simply, pointing. Svetlana nodded, her expression unreadable. When they reached the house, she climbed down from the wagon with surprising grace for someone so large. Marcus grabbed her single battered trunk and led her inside. The house was clean but sparse. 1 bedroom, 1 main room that served as kitchen and living area, and an outhouse in the back. Marcus had prepared the bedroom for her, giving her the only real bed while he'd sleep on a cot in the main room. "You sleep here," he said, gesturing to the bedroom. "Private. Safe." Svetlana looked at him with those storm-cloud eyes, searching for something. Trust, maybe. Or danger. Marcus understood. She'd been bought like livestock, brought to a strange land where she didn't speak the language, handed over to a man she'd never met. "I make food," he offered, moving toward the kitchen area. His hands shook as he worked the stove. This was insane. What had he been thinking? He couldn't communicate with her, didn't know anything about her, and she was so different. Dinner was silent and tense. They sat across from each other at the small wooden table, the only sounds their forks scraping plates and the distant howl of coyotes beginning their nightly chorus. Marcus wanted to say something, anything, to break the suffocating quiet, but words failed him. As darkness fell completely, he showed her how to lock the bedroom door from the inside. "Safe," he repeated. "You're safe here." She nodded slowly, then closed the door. He heard the lock click into place and released a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. 3 days passed in uncomfortable silence. Marcus worked the fields while Svetlana stayed inside, emerging only for meals. She moved through the house like a ghost, her massive presence somehow making no sound. He'd catch glimpses of her watching him through the window, her expression impossible to read. On the 4th morning, Marcus woke to find breakfast already prepared. Svetlana stood by the stove, her back to him, her long blonde braid hanging down to her waist. The food was unlike anything he'd tasted, thick porridge with strange spices, dark bread, and strong tea. It was delicious. "Thank you," he said, genuinely grateful. She turned, and for the first time, he saw something like a smile touch her lips. "Work," she said, gesturing toward the fields. "I work too." Marcus shook his head immediately. "No, that's not necessary. You don't have to." I work, she repeated, her voice firmer. There was no room for argument in her tone. And work she did. Marcus watched in amazement as she hauled fence posts he would have needed help with, repaired the barn roof by herself, and cleared a section of land in half the time it would have taken him. Her strength was genuinely extraordinary, but it was her tireless dedication that left him speechless. By evening, they'd accomplished more than Marcus usually did in a week. He made dinner this time, trying to show appreciation, though his simple stew seemed crude compared to her cooking. They ate together, and the silence felt slightly less oppressive. But as the days turned into weeks, Marcus felt a growing frustration. They worked well together, the ranch was improving rapidly, but they were still strangers. She slept in her locked room, he on his cot. They barely spoke beyond practical necessities. This wasn't what he'd hoped for, though he couldn't articulate what exactly he'd expected. One evening, after a particularly long day, Marcus made a decision. He'd been avoiding the real conversation, the acknowledgement of what their arrangement actually meant. They couldn't continue like this, dancing around the elephant in the room forever. After dinner, as Svetlana began clearing the dishes, Marcus spoke. Sit. Please. We need to talk. She turned, her expression wary. But she sat, folding her large hands on the table. Marcus struggled to find the right words. This isn't. I mean, we're supposed to be. I bought you as my wife, but you're living like a prisoner or a servant. That's not right. Svetlana's face remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. What you want? She asked carefully. I want to know you, Marcus said honestly. I want us to be partners, not just people living in the same house. I'm lonely, Svetlana. That's why I went to that auction. I needed someone. Why you choose me? She asked suddenly. All men, they look away. Scared. Disgust. You not scared? Marcus considered this carefully. I saw your face, he said finally. When everyone was staring, whispering. You didn't let them break you. I understood that. I felt that way my whole life, like I don't quite fit, like I'm too much or not enough. Something shifted in her expression. In my village, I too big. Too strong. Men afraid. Father, he sell me to marriage broker. Say I curse, bring shame. Her English was improving, Marcus realized, probably from listening to him talk while they worked. You're not a curse, Marcus said firmly. You're the best thing that's happened to this ranch in years. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Marcus took a deep breath. But if we're going to be married, truly married, we need to stop hiding from each other. I need to see who you really are, and you need to see me. Svetlana's eyes widened slightly. What you mean? Marcus stood, his heart pounding. This was it. The moment that would define everything going forward. Stand up, he said, his voice coming out rougher than intended. I need to really see you. No more walls between us. She stood slowly, towering over him even though he wasn't a small man. Her face showed uncertainty, maybe fear. Open your legs, Marcus said suddenly, the words escaping before he could think better of them. Let me see your stance, how you hold yourself. I need to understand your strength. Svetlana stared at him, her storm-cloud eyes wide with shock. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Marcus realized how his words had sounded, how crude and demanding they must have seemed. His face flushed hot with embarrassment. I didn't mean, he started, but she cut him off. You won't see my strength? She asked quietly. There was something new in her voice. Challenge, maybe. Or testing. Yes, Marcus said, deciding to commit to his clumsy approach. I want to understand who you are. Not the servant, not the mail-order bride. You. The real you. Svetlana shifted her stance, widening her legs into a stable, powerful position. It was the stance of a warrior, of someone who'd learned to hold their ground against a world that pushed back. Her shoulders squared, her chin lifted, and suddenly Marcus saw her completely differently. She wasn't just tall and strong. She was magnificent. Power radiated from her like heat from a forge. This woman could probably break him in half without effort, yet she'd been cooking his meals and mending his fences like a docile farmhand. In Russia, I fight, she said suddenly. My brothers, they teach me. Father hate this. Say woman should be soft, quiet. But I not soft. I never soft. Marcus stepped closer, fascinated. Show me. Without warning, Svetlana moved. Her fist shot past his head, controlled, precise, stopping inches from contact. The wind of it stirred his hair. Before he could react, she'd shifted, her legs sweeping low in a movement that would have taken him off his feet if she'd followed through. "I could hurt you," she said, straightening up. "Easy. You know this, yes?" "Yes," Marcus admitted. "But you haven't." "Why?" She looked away, and for the first time, he saw vulnerability cross her features. "You first man who not treat me like monster. You give me room with lock. You say safe. You not demand things." Marcus understood. The other men who bought women at that auction, they didn't give them locked rooms, did they? "No," Svetlana said simply. "I hear stories. Women bought, used like animals. Treated worse than horses. I ready to fight first night. Kill you if need." The casual way she said it should have been terrifying. Instead, Marcus felt oddly honored. "But you didn't." "You different," she said. "Confused. Lonely. Scared, like me. I see this." Marcus laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Yeah, I'm terrified. I have no idea what I'm doing. I bought a wife like I was buying cattle, and I hate myself for it. But I was desperate, Svetlana. This ranch, this life, it was killing me slowly. The isolation, the endless work with no one to share it with. I was disappearing." She nodded slowly. "I understand. In Russia, after brothers marry, after father sell me, I disappear too. Become nothing. Ghost in own life." They stood facing each other in the dim lamplight, two people who'd been made invisible by their circumstances, who'd been ground down by societies that had no place for them. "What do we do now?" Marcus asked. Svetlana moved closer, and he had to tilt his head back to maintain eye contact. "We decide," she said. "What we want. Not what father want, not what auction man want. What we want." "I want a partner," Marcus said immediately. "Someone who works beside me, not for me. Someone I can talk to, even if the talking is hard at first. Someone who stays because they choose to, not because they are trapped." "And at night?" Svetlana asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "When work done? You want, wife things?" Marcus felt his face heat again. "I want connection. Real connection. Not just. I'm not interested in forcing anything, Svetlana. But yes, eventually, if we both want it, then yes. A real marriage." She studied him for a long moment, and Marcus felt like she was reading his soul, measuring his worth, deciding his fate. Then, slowly, she reached out her large hand. He took it, and her grip was firm but careful, aware of her strength. "We try," she said finally. "Be partners. Learn each other. See if this work." Relief flooded through Marcus so powerfully his knees nearly buckled. "Yes. Okay. We'll try." That night, Svetlana didn't lock her door. It was a small thing, but it felt monumental. Marcus lay on his cot, staring at the ceiling, listening to her move around in the bedroom. The sound of her presence, no longer hidden away, filled something hollow inside him. The next morning, everything changed. Svetlana emerged from her room dressed in men's work clothes she'd altered to fit her frame. She'd braided her hair tightly and looked ready for battle. "Today, we fix barn completely," she announced. "Then start on north fence. Winter coming, need ready." Marcus grinned. "Yes, They worked like a true team that day. Marcus would start something, and Svetlana would finish it with her superior strength. She would struggle with a calculation or measurement, and Marcus would help her work it out. They developed a rhythm, an unspoken language of cooperation. During lunch, sitting in the shade of the barn, Svetlana said, "You good man, Marcus. Weak in body maybe, but strong here." She tapped her chest. "Heart strong. This better." October arrived with unseasonable warmth, and the ranch thrived under their combined efforts. Marcus taught Svetlana English every evening, and she taught him Russian words in return. Their conversations grew longer, deeper, moving from practical matters to hopes and fears and dreams half forgotten. He learned that she'd wanted to be a teacher in Russia, that she loved mathematics and poetry in equal measure. She learned that he'd inherited the ranch from his father but had always felt inadequate, unable to measure up to the man's larger-than-life reputation. They shared their wounds and found that speaking them aloud made them lighter. The attraction between them grew slowly, like a carefully tended fire. A brush of hands while passing tools. Lingering glances across the dinner table. The awareness of her presence became electric for Marcus, and he caught her watching him with an expression he couldn't quite name. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Svetlana took his hand. Her palm dwarfed his, but the gesture felt perfect. "I happy here," she said simply. "First time in life, I happy." Marcus squeezed her hand. "Me too. I want tell you something," she continued, her voice serious. "When I young girl, babushka, grandmother, she tell me story. She say giant woman in our family line, way back. Woman warrior who save village from invaders. She blessed by old gods, given strength to protect people. Babushka say this why I so big. Not curse. Gift." "Your grandmother was right," Marcus said firmly. "You're a gift, Svetlana. To this ranch, to me." She turned to him, and in her eyes, he saw everything he'd been hoping for. "You really believe?" "I know it," he replied. She leaned down, and he stretched up, and their lips met in a kiss that felt like coming home. It was gentle and exploratory, both of them learning the shape of the other. When they pulled apart, they were both smiling. But happiness, Marcus had learned, was always temporary in this harsh land. The storm came 3 days later, rolling in from the north with unnatural speed. Marcus had seen bad weather before, but this was different. The sky turned a sickly green color, and the wind carried an edge that cut through clothing. "We need to secure everything," he shouted over the rising gale. "This is going to be bad." They worked frantically, moving the animals to shelter, battening down loose objects, reinforcing weak points. But the storm arrived before they could finish. Rain came in horizontal sheets, driven by winds that howled like wounded animals. Then came the hail, chunks of ice the size of eggs, then apples, hammering down with destructive force. "The barn." Svetlana screamed. "The roof." Marcus turned to see the barn roof lifting, the repairs they'd made starting to tear away. If it went, they'd lose all the hay stores, all the equipment, everything. Winter would kill them. "Stay here," he yelled, but Svetlana was already running through the storm. He chased after her, terror clawing at his chest. The hail pounded his back and shoulders, each impact a burst of pain. He saw Svetlana reach the barn and scramble up the side with impossible speed, her strength allowing her to climb where no one else could. She reached the roof just as a massive section began to tear free. Marcus watched in horror as she threw herself across the gap, her body weight and strength the only things holding it down. The wind tore at her, trying to rip her away. Hail battered her exposed back and head. "Svetlana!" Marcus screamed, reaching the barn. "Come down. It's not worth it." "Get rope," she shouted back. "I hold. You secure." Marcus had never moved faster in his life. He grabbed the heaviest rope, scaled the barn ladder, and began working in the screaming wind to tie down the section Svetlana was holding. His fingers were numb, clumsy. The roof bucked and fought like a living thing. Time became meaningless. There was only the work, the storm, and Svetlana's massive form holding their livelihood together through sheer willpower. Finally, after what felt like hours, the last knot was tied. The roof held. "Down!" Marcus yelled. "Now! Before it gets worse." They climbed down together, supporting each other, and stumbled toward the house. Inside, they collapsed on the floor, gasping and shaking. Marcus looked at Svetlana and felt his heart stop. Blood ran down her face from a cut on her forehead. Her back was covered in bruises and wounds from the hail. Her hands were raw and bleeding from gripping the wooden beams. "Oh God," Marcus whispered. "Oh God, Svetlana." "Is okay," she said, though her voice shook. "Barn safe. Animals safe. You could have died." Marcus shouted, surprising himself with his vehemence. "For what? For hay and tools? Nothing is worth your life." She looked at him with those storm-cloud eyes, now filled with pain but also something fierce. "Is our home. I protect our home. I protect our life together. This worth everything." Marcus felt tears streaming down his face. "You're insane. You're beautiful and insane and I love you." The words hung in the air between them. He hadn't planned to say it, hadn't even fully acknowledged the feeling to himself until that moment. But it was true. Somewhere between the auction and now, between the awkward silences and the shared work, between the fear and the hope, he'd fallen completely in love with this giant woman who'd crashed into his life. Svetlana's eyes widened. "You, love?" "Yes," Marcus said, no longer caring about pride or fear or anything else. "I love you. I love your strength and your courage. I love how you fix things and how you're learning English and how you look at the sunset like it's a miracle. I love that you stayed when you could have run. I love you, Svetlana." She reached for him with her damaged hands, pulled him close despite her injuries. "I love you too, Marcus." From maybe second week, I know. You good man. You see me, real me. Not just big body, not just strong back. You see heart. They held each other while the storm raged outside, and Marcus had never felt safer or more complete in his entire life. Morning revealed the destruction. The storm had torn through the valley, devastating other ranches far worse than theirs. Thanks to Svetlana's heroic actions, they'd survived relatively intact. But as neighbors came to assess damage and request help, Marcus saw the way they looked at his wife, with fear, with awe, with something close to worship. "That woman of yours ain't natural," old Tom Peterson said, shaking his head. "Saved my life, pulled a fallen beam off me like it was kindling, but Lord above, she ain't natural." Marcus bristled. "She's strong, Tom. That doesn't make her unnatural." But the comment reflected what many were thinking. Over the following weeks, as they helped rebuild the valley, Svetlana became a legend. The giant guardian, some called her. The Russian Amazon. Stories spread and grew in the telling. She'd held up entire buildings, stopped stampeding cattle with her bare hands, carried injured men over miles of rough terrain. The attention made Svetlana uncomfortable. People treated her like a curiosity or a tool rather than a person. They'd ask her to demonstrate her strength, to lift impossible objects, to perform like a circus act. Marcus saw her withdrawing, becoming quiet again, the light in her eyes dimming. One evening, after a particularly difficult day of people gawking and requesting her help with increasingly absurd tasks, she sat on the porch staring at nothing. "Talk to me," Marcus said, sitting beside her. "I feel like, thing again," she said quietly. "Not person. Just strong back. Useful animal." Marcus felt anger rise in his chest. "That's not what you are." "I know," she said. "But they make me feel this way. In Russia, I too big, too strong. Here, also. Nowhere I fit." "You fit here," Marcus said fiercely. "With me. On our ranch. This is home, Svetlana. Our home. To hell with what anyone else thinks." She turned to him, and he saw tears in her eyes. "You really believe? Even when I'm so different?" "Especially because you're different," Marcus replied. "The world is full of ordinary, Svetlana. It's full of people who fit into their little boxes and never question anything. But you? You're extraordinary. You're a force of nature. And I'm the luckiest man alive because you chose to stay with me." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I scared sometimes. What if one day you wake up, see what everyone else see? See monster instead of woman?" Marcus stood, pulling her to her feet. "Look at me. Really look at me. Do you see doubt in my face? Do you see fear or regret?" She studied him carefully, searching. "No," she admitted. "That's because it's not there," Marcus said. "It never will be. You saved our home, you saved our neighbors, you've built something beautiful here with me. I'm proud of you. I'm in awe of you. And I want to spend the rest of my life showing you that you're loved exactly as you are." Svetlana pulled him into an embrace that lifted him off his feet. He laughed, wrapping his arms around her neck, and she spun him in a circle like he weighed nothing. When she set him down, she was smiling, truly smiling, for the first time in weeks. "Okay," she said. "We stay here. Build our life. Have our home. And if people not like, they can leave us alone." "That's my girl," Marcus grinned. The next morning, they made a decision together. They would help their neighbors when truly needed, but they would set boundaries. Svetlana was not a spectacle or a tool, she was Marcus's wife and an equal partner in their ranch. Anyone who couldn't respect that wasn't welcome. Some neighbors were offended. Others understood. The ones who truly mattered, the ones who'd seen beyond Svetlana's size to her kindness and courage, became genuine friends. Slowly, they built a small community of people who accepted them as they were. Winter came, harsh and bitter, but their preparations had been thorough. The ranch weathered the cold months beautifully. Inside the house, Marcus and Svetlana created their own warmth. They talked for hours, played card games she taught him from Russia, and grew closer with each passing day. One snowy evening in January, as they sat by the fire, Svetlana said, "Marcus? I think maybe I have baby." Marcus's heart stopped. "What? Are you sure?" She placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "Not sure. But I know my body. Something different. Something growing." Joy flooded through him so powerfully he couldn't speak. He just held her hand against her belly and let tears of happiness fall freely. "You happy?" she asked softly. "Even though baby might be big like me?" "I'll be happy no matter what," Marcus said firmly. Boy or girl, big or small, as long as they're healthy and they're ours, that's all that matters. Though I hope they get your strength. And your courage. And your heart. And your kindness, she added. And your patience. And your love. They sat together in the firelight, two people who'd been broken by a cruel world and had somehow found each other across an ocean and an auction block. Two people who'd chosen each other, who'd fought for each other, who'd built something real and true from the ashes of their separate loneliness. Spring arrived with green shoots pushing through the melting snow. Svetlana's pregnancy became obvious. She was carrying big, just as everyone expected. But she was healthy, glowing with happiness, more beautiful than Marcus had ever seen her. On a warm day in April, as they worked together in the garden, planting vegetables for the coming season, Marcus straightened up and looked at everything they'd built. The ranch was thriving. The house had a new coat of paint. The fences were strong. The barn stood solid. And beside him worked the woman who'd made it all possible. "Hey, Svetlana," he called. She looked up from where she was effortlessly digging holes for fence posts. "Yes? Thank you for opening your legs that night." She stared at him blankly for a moment, then burst out laughing, a rich, joyful sound that echoed across their land. "You still embarrassed about that? Your face so red. You try sound commanding but instead sound like nervous boy." Marcus laughed too, remembering that awkward moment. "I was a nervous boy. Still am sometimes. But you saw past that. You gave me a chance." She walked over, still chuckling, and wrapped him in her arms. "We both take chance. We both win." "Yeah," Marcus agreed, resting his head against her chest, listening to her strong, steady heartbeat. "We definitely won." And as the sun set over Thunder Ridge, painting their ranch in gold and crimson, the lonely rancher and the giant bride stood together. Two souls who'd found home not in a place, but in each other. The world might never fully understand them, might always see them as odd or mismatched or strange. But in their hearts, in the life they'd built together, they were perfect. They were loved. They were home.